Handloaders, bullet casters, welcome back to my bench. Hey folks, time to go over a little bit of data and information from our little, what should we call it? Skeeter load test? So if you recall, we worked up some loads going up to 15 grains of Alliant 2400. And by doing this, we were able to reach some velocities that really resemble the Skeeter load of over 1,000 feet per second. I saved a few of the cases here because I would like for us to kind of take a look at what we have. You know, I don't want us to really place so much emphasis on primer appearance that we kind of lose a little bit of good sense about other signs that show that we're close to pressures. Let's come on in and kind of take a look. This is our starting load where we chose 13.5 grains. And what we have is a pretty healthy primer. Notice that we're not real sharp on these edges around the circumference or inside the divot. Now we were hitting velocities well getting into the mid 900s with these two. Now there's only 2 rounds per charge weight, so we can't invest too much confidence in chrono velocities, but I think it gives us a good enough idea combined with primer appearance. So perhaps this will be just a piece of the story. Now these are fairly hard primers. CCI makes a good hard primer cup. You know, sometimes that makes a difference. And even a few things like the case itself. Do we have any problems out of the cases? You know, one thing that I do tend to look for sometimes is are we totally sooty on the inside? You know, like it was an incomplete burn. And when we move along, we reach 14 grains here. There's not a great deal of difference. I would say at 14.5, this is where I start to kind of notice some changes with the primer. And what I'm seeing here is the surface all around here starts to become real flat. Now that's a pretty good indicator that we're getting some healthy pressure. Now, we're not cratered in the sense that we're having primer material flow back or build up, which is definitely a good thing. Now, is it possible that a less hard primer like a Federal would? Maybe. And again, that's why I say we don't want to put too much emphasis. And at this point here, is where we actually do start to reach those Skeeter velocities. We're at 1,002 feet per second. Then we have a pretty significant jump to 1,049 feet per second. But as we reach in, as we hit that 15 grain mark, that's where I personally felt like I started seeing where the primer indicated a little bit more definition around the edges. Could we have carried it up to 16 grains? That's what it looked like in the Brian Pierce article. Based off of this primer, maybe. I'm not so sure we're in a bad spot, but I certainly felt like we took it as high as we needed. In fact, 14.5 grains is where we actually reached our Skeeter velocities. Now again, this is only 2 rounds per charge weight, but looking at the data that we do have, here's some things that are kind of hard to ignore. This first charge, between the two, we only have a 0.6 of a foot per second difference. Now, what would that look like if we had 6 or 7 more? I don't know. But what I do know is that is a pretty tight extreme spread. Again, don't want to put too much emphasis being 2 rounds, but maybe if we also think of how our primers look through that, I don't know. but it's interesting, I think. Then we jump up to the 14 grains, and we're still 6.6. Guys, that is not a lot. So what I do know, somewhere in here, I feel like there's some extreme consistency. Now we jump up a little bit higher, and that all starts to fall apart. We now have a 47 feet per second spread. And it seems kind of like maybe we peaked up and then started to kind of come back down, because when we got to our 15 grain load, we start seeing where we're coming back down to the single digits. So maybe what we sort of have going on here, sort of like nodes on a rifle maybe. Some people who are big into ladder testing might look at something like this and say, you know, let's take a look. We got 6 grains, then we higher, that's our 6.6, and we have this huge spike. And we come back down, and now we have this little 9 feet per second difference. You know, I just kind of think it's interesting to look at, to consider. So what I did was I just used some of these little hints, some of these little clues to basically help guide me on determining what charge weight I wanted to continue the test at. Now remember, the purpose of the test is to see if there is a very significant difference in the data between loading the exact same round with one set of dies versus a completely different die arrangement. That's kind of what I'm curious about. Do I have to have Elmer Keith style 44 loads to do this? No, I don't. In fact, some nice easy target loads would be nice. However, I thought it was a lot of fun to jump into some 4-digit velocities to do this and maybe just honor this 44's heritage a little bit. So what I picked is I really felt that something in this area of 13.5 to 14 grains was going to be a good load. Anything in this area. So I basically just picked a number. And with that number, voila. What we have on one side here is purely the RCBS dies, and the other side is my own personal arrangement of dies. And it'll be fun to see what it looks like when we get the chrono data, and hopefully some good accuracy data also. Might not make a difference at all, but we're going to find out. But anyways, until then, thanks for hanging out with me. Like, subscribe, Leadsmith out.